as president of West Kentucky Community Technical College. Definitely want to thank you all for taking the time to be here for what has been billed as our town hall conversation as part of our Black History Month series here at the college. To those watching live on Facebook, we definitely want to encourage you to spread the word, get as many people to tune in as well. This is really, in many ways, very surreal for me. Those who may not have not had the opportunity to connect with, I was in Paducah from 1990 to 2003 as a much younger lad. And February 1991 was the first town hall meeting. We held it right over there in the Clemens Theater. And then, as now, the key purpose behind the meeting felt it was very important that we have a conversation, particularly during Black History Month, regarding the generational divide, if you will, between African American leaders. How do we get more involved in the community? At that point in time in the early 90s, there was challenges in terms of representation, City Hall, in education, jobs, engagement and involvement with the NAACP. Then, as now, many of these issues still remain. So this 30-plus year conversation continues. I told my wife that it was interesting too because I actually, maybe it was just a little superficial, but this is the exact suit and tie I wore for, so I'm still fitting in it, for whatever that was worth. You can edit that out afterwards. I'm just saying. So my other two comments before I bring JW up, it basically was this. Ultimately, if there's a question in terms of ultimately what do we need to get out of this? What is it that we want to do? I will tell you that, and I can hear the critics already, that we just get together and talk and there's never any action. So the mayor was very gracious in let me have access to, so what I'm holding here, and we have several there in the lobby area. So this is a list of all of the boards in the city and the application form. So one action step, as I do the math in the room, if we get 50 to 20 people who are not engaged and involved, you know who you are, sign up, let's get involved and change things. Amen. All right? That's how you change things, through involvement. Learning was there, and that's how we change the discussion and the discourse. I'm looking forward to the panelists. I want to thank them ahead of time. I'm sure they'll keep it lively and engaged. Thanks for all of you here again in attendance. And I will transition quickly then to J.W. Cleary so that the bulk of the time will be for the panel, J.W. Be brief.
And you know, I was hoping, first giving honor to God to everybody that's here, I was hoping that I could go before Dr. Reese and he could be the wrap-up person. But he has made sure that I knew kind of what to do. And I will say this, 30 years ago when Dr. Reese came here, it was myself, Dr. Reese, and a couple others. We kind of worked together as a team and we made a difference in our town. But also, I come under the leadership of people like W.C. Young and Robert Coleman and W.G. Harvey, I tell you. And I don't know how you know those people, but 30 years ago, if they said jump, I was willing to jump. I just say, how high you want me to go? So myself and, like I said, and Dr. Reese, we got together. But at the time, everybody, and one of W.C.'s words was the fact that he would say that I got my union card in one hand and I got my NAACP card in the other hand. And I can go back and remember where we had 500 people. Everybody was a member. I mean, it was unheard of somebody, especially being African American, of not being a member of the NAACP. So we need to get back to those basics is what it amounts to. And also, if you look the history of the NAACP, it was 60 people that started it back in 1908. Well, out of that 60 people, it was only 7 of them that was African Americans. So we need white Americans also. That myth about the NAACP being a black organization, that never been true, and it's not true today. We got probably as many white Americans as members of the NAACP as we do black Americans. So we need everyone to come on board. So I say to you, I never really pushed membership. I wanted you to do it because you wanted to do it. But the time has come now. If you're not registered to vote, and you know somebody that's not ready to vote, we need to encourage them to get registered to vote and become a member of the NAACP. Thanks.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to say thank you for coming out this evening for the town hall meeting. I am Shaveen Duncan Herring. I serve as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at West Kentucky Community and Technical College. You didn't come out here to hear me. You came out here to hear our community members as panelists, and I'm going to move on and introduce them. We have Pastor Anthony Walton from Christ Temple Apostolical Church. We also have Aline Jones, principal of Paducah Middle School. We have Charles Hamilton, board member of McCracken County Community Career Endowment. We also have Lakita Badeau, director of Tornado Alley Youth Services, Paducah Tillman High School. We have Tony Copeland, planner, supervisor with Articuma. We also have Neil Clark, Executive Director with Oscar Cross Boys and Girls Club. And we have Corbin Snarden, Assistant Principal, Paducah Middle School. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to the moderator, Samaria Morrison.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shamaria Morrison. I'm a reporter at WPSD Local 6. I was blessed enough to call Paducah my home about a year ago today, and I am very excited to be here moderating this event. I know as a young person who is very much intrigued and want to be a part of my community as much as possible, these things don't happen around in our generation now, and so I'm glad that we are trying to figure out what that divide is and that those things, actionable items that we can come away with today and continue to go with what the Black agenda may be to make sure there's things that are actionable for the community. So we will start it off with some questions that we have for the panel. Those questions will last for about 40 minutes. And then after, we will open it up so you all can have some questions and have some answers as well. We will be having the mic passed around for those things to happen. I'll go ahead and get us started with our first question for our panelists. If we can try to be respectful of time and everyone else's time so all of us can kind of get through these. We have a list of questions that we've already kind of gone through, and we'll start from there, and I'll say the first one. And also, we have an audience on Facebook Live, so making sure that you're speaking loudly and clearly towards the mic, and also repeating those questions that you may get from the audience once we do open it up to them. Everyone, we're all on the same page? Okay, all right, so we'll start with our first one. From your perspective, give us a 2-minute overview of the challenges in the African American community in Paducah. And we'll go ahead and just start kind of from left to right, and we'll continue to rotate with those answers, unless someone wants to start off first. All right.
Okay, from my perspective, give a 2-minute overview of the challenges in the African American community in Paducah. My perspective. It's not going to take 2 minutes, but really I don't believe the challenges are any different than any other city or state in America. A great number of parents who cannot or do not discipline because of the legal system preventing punishments for wrongdoing, therefore leaving a door opened for some of our children to be placed in-school suspension, alternative schools, the juvenile detention center, which could eventually lead them to the prison system, whose disparity has seemingly been forgotten about and kept from public awareness across the country, where African Americans are more likely than white Americans to be arrested. Once arrested, they are more likely to be convicted, and once convicted, and they are more likely to experience lengthy prison sentences. African American adults are 5.9 times more likely to be incarcerated than whites, and there are not enough deterrents made available to prevent a great portion of this.
Thank you so much, Pastor.
Hello. I am coming from a place of someone who does not live in the community, so I'm going to take this question from the perspective of what I see as an administrator at Paducah Middle School. So my perspective of the challenges in the African American community here in Paducah, from my perspective, as I said, a principal, is getting our parents involved in our students' education. Be willing to come out to the schools, visit the school, hear the things that the teachers have to say without always thinking that we're coming from a negative place. Because ultimately what we want is to have well-educated children, and they all have to come through Paducah Middle School while they're here, and we want to be that help for them. So I invite our parents to come, have an open mind of what you're coming to the school to hear, and be willing to be that force that's going to be the person that's going to step in and help your child be the best student that they can be.
Thank you so much.
I would say that I'm probably the oldest person on this panel, and probably lived here in Paducah longer than most. I'm 73, and I remember, very many people remember the old Lincoln High School. Well, I went to Lincoln, and then went to, it was called Brazelton Junior High School back then. But I found that the perspective is that we as a community, we lack respect for one another. When I grew up, my mother, we lived out in Arcadia, which is on about where the ballparks are now, but if someone's mother told them that lived on the south side, told my mother that I'd done something, she didn't have to know who she was. It was just that respect. We don't consider just respecting each other just because we deserve. If I don't give you the reason disrespect, you automatically should respect me just out of the, we're struggling to accomplish the same thing and values. But now, some of my that I consider friends then, that back then, that have been very successful, the problem I see with Paducah, we have lost some of our best young black youth to other cities because they haven't been given the opportunity. And they haven't been given the opportunity because some of us haven't stepped up to give them that support that they need. Amen. And so they need some guidance, and they need to know someone has their back. And so those of us that are somewhat over the hill, coming down on the other side, let's get out there and just try to help bring about the changes to help the young folks coming along now. I'm looking at Corbin, I'm looking at Ms. Ledoux here. Those young folks are coming out, stepping out. Let's get behind them, support them. And that don't mean that we have to be racist. All we just want to do, JW, years ago, we used to ask the city, just level the playing field. If we don't make it, then that's our problem. But stop putting barriers in front of us and just allow the playing field and let us accomplish what we can accomplish on our own.
Amen. All right, I'm gonna see if my mic is working, so I'm gonna take y'all mic back. First off, good afternoon. Thank you guys, or it's evening time, right? Because it's dinner time, so good evening. Thank you guys for the opportunity to share. And from my perspective, this is my perspective, not all the educators. The big elephant in the room for me is what I see amongst the black community, African American community, is division. That's the big elephant in the room. And for example, my family and I, we've been here a little over 10 years, maybe longer, but I don't want to focus on that. But it's like if you're not in a certain organization or if you don't go to a certain church, those members aren't going to support you. And that's facts. And luckily, I'm a go-getter, and I understand that it's not about me and it's about God. And when you're on God's mission, things happen and you're able to accomplish things. But so many of us young professionals, black professionals, could be so much further when it comes to leadership, as Mr. Hamilton stated, if we had the mentorship of the veteran and the seasoned Paducahians. Not just because we're not from here doesn't mean that you should not share your expertise. And that is the reason for a lot of black professionals, young professionals seeking opportunities outside of Paducah, even those who were born and raised here. So you can imagine those transplants, like Corbin and I, what we face and how some days it's a little difficult to stay encouraged when you don't have that support. My second challenge that I would focus on is we need to encourage our youth to get more involved. And to see one student, Gabby Copeland, which is an outstanding student, role model for all students. I don't care if you're in the county schools or Callaway County schools or Paducah Independent schools, but it's a shame that we only have her in the audience. So what does that say? She has awesome parents, first off. And my two little boys would be here making noise if they didn't have basketball practice. But what they need to see is representation. They need to see people who look like them in leadership roles so they can feel that their voice matters and that forums such as this is important. So I would say division and getting our youth more involved will be the two challenges that I see for Paducah.
Thank you. Mr. Copeland?
Thank you. The challenges that I see is the inactivity, the engagement that the community does not have. Dr. Reese indicated all these boards right here. It's amazing to me that we come to the forefront when things do not happen as we expect them to happen, but we neglect to be involved in the community and being part of boards that make executive decisions to better the community and as well as this nation. So my challenge to everybody is to be active, be that voice, be proactive as opposed to being reactive. Because a lot of times we react to things that have happened as opposed to stepping to the forefront and say, you know what, I'm in a position that I can make some type of achievement and I can make a point of view. Also, to build upon what a couple of people have stated, for the educators up here, one of the best things that I have is Parent Portal. It's the best thing I had. I was in the barbershop and I was talking to a gentleman and I was talking about how I can see with my kids. That is something that we do not have now. It starts at home. It definitely starts at home. So we need to be more engaged with our children and grandchildren in order to get them on the correct path, see what they're doing in school. If they got homework, we need to stay on them, so let them know that if they don't continue, then they're going to get lost in the numbers. So we as a community have to be that, but also we are the neighborhood that's raising these kids. It may not be your child, but we need to come together like it used to be back in the day. We watched over everybody. We for the better good of the community. And those are the challenges that I see that we can overcome if we just engage and be very active and be proactive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm going to keep mine a little bit on a broader scale. Please keep in mind that my thoughts are from a Paducanian who grew up here on the south side of Paducah. So it truly is a pleasure to be here to share some insight as someone who's returned to the community. But I wouldn't be where I am today without some of the people in this room. And so I want to say thank you in advance. But as I see it, and I remember the day I went off to college, one of the things that struck me was how hard my mom worked. We didn't have a silver spoon in our mouths. To give you a good example, we didn't have a car. I walked and ran, literally ran. Everybody know I have a track star history at Tillman. But I really walked everywhere I went. And my first car wasn't until after I graduated from college. And my mom graduated from college when I graduated from college. And looking back on it and looking at some of the things that I'm experiencing now in a senior leadership role with Oscar Cross Boys and Girls Club, is that there seems to be a systematic process of lack of economic development opportunities for African Americans in Paducah. I saw a stat today where we said that the number of people in Paducah have decreased in the last 2 years. And I'm thinking, here it is, this is a great melting pot full of opportunity. So why is it that we're having people leaving? Why is there so much prosperity, well, lack of prosperity in the community, especially African American community? And so when we talk about some of the issues that my colleagues to my right so far have said, you know, I look back and I think of some of the families that I'm working with, the Boys and Girls Club. To be honest with you, some of those families' basic needs are not met. So it's tough to even try to have them to fathom the opportunity to even go and try to deal with some of the things I got to deal with when they just trying to feed their kids, just like my mother 30 years ago. So you got to really look at yourselves and say, what is the root of our problem? Is it the government? Is it ourselves? Is it citizens? Is it church? We're talking about some institutions here in Paducah that have been staples in our community for a long time. I am smart enough to know if you do the same thing, you get the what? So, all right. And so when we say some of our challenges, what about those shared opportunities for growth and accessibility to these opportunities? Welcome us to the table. If you really listen real close, and you know, I know we're gonna have some more questions to answer, but I'm going through this right now about being at the table and making decisions about things that impact our kids. And it's tough to have a conversation and sit here and be honest and open and say, okay, this is the rhetoric that I'm hearing, but as a young African-American male, I need the support of my community. And you heard this through the panel, but at the same time, I'm seeing some of the things that's being played along like it was played when I was a child growing up. Amen. That's just being open and honest. And so I sit here today and challenge you all to just listen to some of the words and be like JW said and just be a part of the opportunity to make things better, right? And so that's what I bring to the table as far as what I see as African Americans and what's plaguing our community. And so I pass it on to Mr. Snorton. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So I'll be brief with my comments. So and much respect to all of my colleagues on here. I do want to say that I echo some of the same sentiments that, you know, especially there's a lot of shared opportunities that we have. Those of you that know me well enough to know that I am very stubborn and I love challenges. So if there's a challenge, that means that you have some work to do. That means there's opportunity for growth. So, but from my perspective of what's going on here in Paducah for African Americans, I see a problem with visibility. There are not enough of us in high profile areas. There's not enough accessibility. So even if there are African Americans in leadership positions, there's far too few. One person cannot do it all. One individual or organization cannot do it all. That does not mean that there are not fantastic people doing great work right now, but it does mean that they cannot do it by themselves. And then there's a lack of, you know, equity. And I'm not talking equality. It's never going to be equal. It's never going to be fair. You know, we all know that life isn't fair, but I am talking about equitable. And what Mr. Hamilton was saying about if you level the playing field, it makes it a lot easier. And then you fail or succeed on your own merit and not because somebody botched the system. I do think that there is a change in values, that what we fight over as a community, sometimes we major in the minors and minor in the majors, that we're not looking for the right opportunities. You know, it shouldn't matter who gets this position, who gets that position, as long as you're qualified and you do a good job for it, you know, then yeah, I'm definitely going to support any of my brothers and sisters here on this board, or on this panel, I'm sorry, to be able to get in those positions of success. I don't have to be that crab in a barrel that pulls you down. I should be able to push you up. I definitely think that education is a barrier. I am an educator, so it is important to not just have, you know, a good school education. Yes, I believe that you need your reading, writing, and arithmetic. But, you know, I had some parents that gave me some sense enough to have some common sense, to have a little street sense. You know, just to be able to learn the value of hard work, to learn the value that nothing comes easy in life, nothing comes free, that if you want something, you're going to have to work for it. And if you work for it and you're faithful enough for it, things will happen, but you can't do it by yourself. You know, I definitely think that division is real, and that if we stop being so divisive about who has this or who has this or fighting for this this piece of the pie, we would all see that, you know, we're eating from the same the same pie. It doesn't matter who has a piece, it's the same pie. So, you know, I take the approach of also when it comes to accessibility, we need to make sure that we're empowering our community. I feel like empowerment is a big impediment. You know, we need to support those business leaders. We need to support those entrepreneurs. We need to quit saying, this is just my own personal perspective, but we need to quit saying things like, you know, well, we got to have a seat at the table. Forget that. I can cook myself. I will prepare my own table. If you wait long enough, we have to make sure that we're bringing something to the table to eat. So, you know, I think that that is a big barrier too, but those are just my thoughts and perspectives.
Thank you so much. And prior to us going to our second question, I want to encourage everyone. I want to do just something real small, because you don't want this conversation to be an echo chamber. I see a lot of these people a lot of times at a lot of the same places. I can imagine you all want to reach other people who might not be able to get here, and we all know people are probably working. You know, it's not because they don't want to come, it's because they can't. So everyone indulge me for a second. Everybody close your eyes real quick. I'm going to kind of reiterate some of the things that our panel just talked about, some key points that they talked about. And the question was, from your perspective, give a 2-minute overview of the challenges in the African-American community in Paducah. And as I say these words, I want you to think of someone who you can share that with, so that you now have an accountability portion to share this knowledge with someone else, so that this goes past this room. Okay, so we had a lack of discipline. Involvement was lacking. A lack of respect between everyone. Black youth, lost black youth, people not coming back. A division between the African-American community, inactivity, lack of engagement, lack of economic opportunity, lack of prosperity, visibility, equity, education, and more empowerment. So now this is everyone being called out to make sure you pass this information along and continue to take notes. Because if we was in church and you wasn't taking notes, it'd be a problem. So we're going to do the same. We'll have the same energy while we're here to make sure we pass this along. And so with that, we'll go to our second question, which is there a generational divide among younger and older African Americans? And I would ask the panel to be specific with what that might be, and you can share an experience of yourself. And we'll kind of keep it towards that 2-3 minutes as well, if, to just make sure everyone gets an opportunity to share their answer.
Is there a generational? Is there a generational divide among younger and older African Americans? I would have to say a tremendous divide, because the younger generation basically are being raised by younger people, much younger than the older generation. And because of that, they don't recognize or appreciate the things that the older generation has gone through. It's like they don't get out to vote, but the older generation know what it took to get them the rights to vote. So the younger generation basically are just playing games, they playing videos, they want to go into sports and leaving all the important things behind. And there were people that were killed, that were mistreated, did all kinds of things just to get us the rights that we have. But then when it comes, again, like I said, when it comes to voting, where are we? So I think the younger generation is blinded to the things that are necessary for them and to the things that are available for them. And they just take it for granted.
Thank you.
So is there a generational divide among younger and older African Americans? Yes, I would agree that there is. Much of what I see is the younger generation not knowing, as the gentleman stated here, what the older generation has gone through to get them to be able to do the things that they're doing today. I see that a lot of our younger generation do not know about our history. And a lot of them, a lot of times, don't care to want to know about it either. And so what I think that we can do about that is, you know, a lot of times we think about school being the only way that our students can learn about our history, but it's not. I went to school, I graduated from Ballard Memorial. I did not learn about my history while I was going through school. I learned about my history from my grandmother, my father, my mother, my uncles and my aunts. That's how I learned about my history. And so I think it's going to have to come from us, having our older generation to come in and talk to our students about the history, their history, what they have gone through. It's going to take families getting together and talking about the history so that the younger generation don't forget it. And I'm afraid that's going to happen if we don't intervene and start doing those type of things.
Thank you.
Yes, I believe there is a device, but I think it's coming from because of the device between us older. If I respect you, your kids are going to respect me. And so if we learn to respect each other, that's going to feed off and cover that gap that we have in between. But if we don't have, kids learn that you don't respect me, so why should they respect me? And so it passes right along. And so when we learn how to have respect for each other, right, wrong, indifferent, we don't have to agree on everything to respect each other. And so if we work that situation out, I think the community would be a lot better off.
Thank you.
So the question, is there a generational divide among younger and older African Americans? I wouldn't call it a divide, but I would say a disconnect, totally. As an educator, you see students who don't have those essential life skills, unlike the older generation, and that's due to so many things, especially technology. It's good, but then it can be the devil. So, and another thing is we have, one of the gentlemen stated earlier, we have younger parents that don't have the tools needed. So that's when our grandparents and the older generation needs to step in. And I know y'all are thinking, I don't have the energy. Those are your kids. But guess what? They are the future. So we have to go back to the respect, go back to it takes a village to raise a child if we are going to truly make a difference. And like Ms. Jones stated, as educators, we can only do so much. And I know Copeland stated earlier, it starts at home. But when the parents don't have those tools needed, it's going to take the community coming together. So that is my opinion.
Thank you.
As everyone has stated, the question is there a generational divide among younger and older African Americans? Yes, there is. And I see it being one of the key aspects I see is because it's a communication breakdown. As the panel has indicated, technology has been great in some aspects, but it's got to the point that we do not interact and communicate with our kids. Our kids are technology based. You know, at times we could sit at the dinner table. We could have discussion. We could talk about issues, concerns, and things like that. Actually, this week, Paducah-Dillman has had a Black History Month, and they asked a couple of the organizations from colleges to come in and do a presentation. So I was at Paducah-Tillman today during the lunch period, and we were doing a presentation on our fraternity. And we came in, we had the microphone, and we was talking to these kids, trying to educate them about historically Black colleges, things that are happening and everything, and you'd be amazed at the audience. They were on their cell phones. There's a breakdown. There's a breakdown. So what the question is, how do we engage and get them involved? Because the biggest thing that we find out in our community, a lot of people don't want to listen. It falls on deaf ears. I deal with that with my kids. Of course, they'll tell me, they'll say, Dad, we don't want to hear about how things used to be. This is a new age. This is a different age. So the breakdown is, I'm trying to convince you to stop getting ready to step in that ditch. And I'm trying to help you and assist you. So there is a breakdown between the two. But as everyone has said, you have to get respect. You have to get respect. And we shouldn't have to demand respect. You know, when I was growing up, I wanted to engage with older people because that's how I was able to learn and be able to understand the things that they had been through, where they was going, their intentions and their goals. Now we have a hesitation where teenagers, young kids, they don't want to interact with older people because they have all the answers. They don't need us. But we seem to find out that they'll come back to us and they'll say, okay, I understand. So we got to close the gap, but it takes all of us to somehow close that gap with them. Thank you.
Is there a generational divide among younger and older African Americans? I would concur and say that there is a divide. I think I'm believing more of Lakita saying that it's a disconnect. And I think that starts with the lack of trust on both sides. If I could be more critical, being someone who's may not look 50, but I'm 50, I still think I'm young. I may not be older than some of our seasoned individuals here, but I listened growing up, and they listened to me. What I see now, me being 50, and I'm having the kids with me, I have to be honest, most people that are older than me are not listening. I'm gonna say this again. Most people that are older than me are not listening. The reason why, because it don't look, sound like it used to be. And the disconnect is there just because of what the panel has said about technology and different ways of learning and those type of things. And we just have to go back to our roots of respect, because sometimes you just have to sit down with a kid and just listen. I tell my board all the time at the Boys and Girls Club that, you know, my job doesn't start when the kids get there. It's actually, you know, long after those hours, because I'm putting out so many fires. And so I spend my mornings addressing more of the managerial type stuff, CEO stuff. But when 2 o'clock hits, I have to have a clock in my mind to gear towards what's going to happen, not for the next 4 hours of being open, but the next 5, 6 hours, because I'm going to have to be making a couple calls after 6 o'clock, because that's the nature of the game that I'm playing in. And so a lot of that is sitting down and listening. I have to listen to parents who are my age, parents who are older, parents who are younger. And I listen to the kids who are obviously younger. And that builds that rapport. The other side of it is that the lack of trust from the older generation is sometimes you don't want to turn things over because they have not exhibited the skill sets that you think they should have. I witnessed this for myself. And so there's an issue of how can I pass the torch? Well, I'm not ready to pass the torch up because the ideal candidate may not be there or it hasn't been molded the way I want it to be molded. Well, I'm here to say in the future is unforeseen. And so the way it looks in the past may not always look the way it did and may look differently, okay? And so I think we need to learn to get back to what the panel was talking about, is that trust and that respect thing where we just have to communicate. I'm blessed to be married, and my wife and I, we communicate and we over-communicate and we over-communicate. I said my wife and I, but I left out my daughter because there's about 3 more levels of communication is there that I have to exhibit, right? And so I cannot at one time, we want to impress our values on our kids to make sure that we're the parents that we want them to be. But at the end of the day, she's 8 years old, and I'm afraid that if I don't listen, there's going to be a day when she's a teenager where she may not want to come to me. And so do I want that disconnect to happen then? Well, I better get my act together as a parent now, right? And so that's what we have to think about when we move forward as far as our generational disconnect. We have to build those relationships and keep forging those relationships. Thank you.
All right. So, is there a generational divide? Yes. But before I get to that divide, you really 50?
I know.
What fountain of youth did you find? Man. So it's good to laugh, but I'm like, no, seriously, what are you drinking? But no, serious. Is there a generational divide? Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, instead of asking me this question, I'm going to kind of answer it with a question. So, or let's do a thought experiment here. We'll all learn something here. Raise your hand if you're under the age of 35. There's your answer. There's your answer. So is there a generational divide? Yes. I see it twofold. I love the comments that everyone on the panel made. I see, yes, there is that bridge between old and new, but old and new has always been here. When the older generation was younger, I'm sure that, you might have had a little bit of a problem connecting with your grandparents or, connecting with your parents. That's nothing new. But what I see from my perspective is we have a generation of trying to have something and a generation that won't let go of what they have. At some point, you do have to pass the torch. You can't hold on to it forever. And so I think that the younger generation, yes, technology does get in the way. God, I hate social media. But technology does get in the way because we don't communicate the same way that we used to. It's very, I won't say difficult, but you have to have a lot more patience when you have a conversation with the younger generation today. But they want to be heard and listened to just like anybody else. And that takes a lot of patience too, on both sides. It takes patience for the younger generation to try to receive that information. It takes patience for the more seasoned generation to have that knowledge expounded upon. I also see that in many ways for the divide, we are too traditional. And what I mean by that is we think that because something has always worked, that it will work now. And we don't always take notice of the fact that times do change. The way that we process things, the way that we take things in is different than it was before. Kids are a little different now. They've grown up with a phone in their hand. So it is a little different. That doesn't mean that values have changed. No, values like what Mr. Hamilton was saying, like respect, and what Mr. Clark was saying about trust, those never change. But some of the strategies and things that you have to do to be successful do. I think that when we stay too long in tradition, I believe it was Dr. Miles Monroe that said tradition is frozen success. Just because it was successful then doesn't mean it's going to have the most bang for its buck now. And so if we really want people to appreciate if we really want to bridge that divide, you're going to have to, it's going to have some compromise on both sides. Yeah, kids are going to have to put down the phone and be willing to listen. But at the same time, the older generation is going to have to take a stop and take a pause and go, okay, they're really into this. How can I get into this? That doesn't mean that you're going to be, experts in social media or get into all of the music and stuff that's in today or fashion or whatever, but it does mean taking a chance and an opportunity to see why is this generation interested in this? Why are kids like this today? Because you'd be surprised that if you sit and listen, and when I say listen, I actually mean listen, not oh, I heard what you said, but I mean listening to learn. Like, don't say nothing, just give it a moment, even if you think it's the dumbest idea in the world, because I work in a middle school, so I've heard some pretty dumb things. But if you just sit and listen for a moment, you'd be surprised what answers that you get. So those are I think that's probably the best way to bridge that disconnect. Is the only way that you can reconnect something is if it's plugged in. And that requires you to actually stop, plug into whoever you're listening to, give the focus and attention to that person.
Okay, thank you so much. And so for these next few questions, we won't have the whole panel answer. We'll I'll ask some specific people. And so federal, state, and local elections are coming out. We have 2 people who are on the panel right now who are running for office. But I wanted to ask some of the other members about what are those specific things, what are their concerns with elections coming up? And specifically, honestly, local and state elections, because I know we all tend to come out, this is a big election year because you have the federal elections, but your most impact is going to be on the local and state level. So I'll go ahead and ask Ms. Jones, what do you think about, what's some concerns that you have with elections?
Once again, I'm not from the community, so I'm not really sure as to, what the major concerns are for the state of Kentucky. Oh, yes, sorry. So what are the federal and state and local, with the federal and state and local elections are coming up, what are my concerns? So with me not being directly from the state of Kentucky, well, I am from the state of Kentucky. I don't currently live in the state of Kentucky. I'm not really sure of what is the ideas and the issues that are concerning the community. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that question.
I'll go ahead and pass it to Mr. Clark then. Do you have anything specifically regarding that question?
Just off the top of my head, I think as I look at younger voters, I think their knowledge about the voting process and how important it is. Sometimes our youth get so focused on the media, and the media promotes the presidential elections and things of that nature. And so when it comes back down to the state and local level, sometimes they don't know they don't understand the impact of how your vote helps that process from the 3 levels. And so I think that piece is very important. I think we need to do more with like having the opportunity to have a panel where we're speaking to that group, not necessarily the high school group, because obviously most of them are under the age of 18, but what about that group, for example, my boys club group who graduates in the tracking system between the age of 18 to 24, which is a really, really strong group. And is that group really lost? And what are their ideologies about where we go with our local, state, and federal government, those type of things? And so I think that's kind of what my concerns are, because it's just ignorance on my behalf and I don't know. And so that kind of scares me, because I did my due diligence while I was in school to try to be informed and inform others, but I'm out of the loop and, say, hey, what are we doing here in Paducah to educate that group?
All right, so if any of the other panel members want to contribute to that question before we move on to the next one and we have some more people, you'll all.
Yes, with the upcoming elections, with the different political people looking for a position and everything, I'm looking for an opportunity to be trustworthy and upfront and to engage in the concerns that I have for Paducah and McCracken County. This is a Tony Copeland quote. When I talk to people, I always indicate to them, say, for you to insinuate inconclusive data based upon your perception of that data is an insult to my integrity. So when you look through a lens needs to be focused. You can put Windex on the lens, but the majority of the distortion comes from the person looking through the lens. You can focus the lens, you can clean the lens, but what we have to do with the elections coming up, we have to have our politicians to look through that lens, but also be open-minded about my concerns. Don't be so blind and put your blinders on that when we have an interaction, we have a conversation, that you don't see things from my perspective. You can give me the data, the stats, and everything like that, and we can have debate and dialogue, but to try to impose into me your viewpoint, and I'm seeing it from a different perspective, then I'm just asking you just to see it, take time, back up, and understand where I'm coming from. So I think, and this is my viewpoint only, that to be engaged with the politicians and sit down and have discussion with them and say, okay, listen, I know your position on certain issues, but just take a little time to see it from my viewpoint. Focus the lens all you want to, put the Windex on the lens, but you also got to remember the person that's looking through the lens is coming from their heart. So that's why I'm trying to change their heart and try to change their view. Thank you.
Thank you. And we had you also.
Well, if you look around the audience, the election coming up, and you look at the candidates that are running for all the different positions, we have some here, and I don't know, maybe they got good reason for not being here, but if I was a candidate running for a position, I would really want the audience to see me being, at least being concerned to hear.
That's right.
So when Brother Copeland talk about engaged, I can't engage you if you don't want to be engaged. So if you don't come out to participate and to show yourself to be that person that you want to earn my vote, then I can't see myself approaching you. Then sometimes it's very difficult to get to candidates, get the time and the space. So my thing is, it's like all the different things going on within the city, in the county, we need to be concerned. There's some things that's going to affect some of our kids and our grandkids for the long term. And when I hear talk about economic development is one of the problems with raising families. A person that's living on a fixed income And if they have a transportation, all the insurance, just about every tax base in the city and the county rose this year. Every element. And those of us who live in the county, when Jackson Purchase built that new facility, our utility bill is kind of nice now, fairly nice. But after that, so we need to be concerned, but we don't, the meetings that the county had, the one meeting I went to, I was the only minority in there. And don't tell me, I'm not the only one that's going to be affected by that insurance premium. But we don't seem to hold enough concern to get ourselves involved to make a difference. So that's what the problem is going to be.
Thank you so much. And like I mentioned before, we have two candidates, people running for office on this board, and I think this next question, I'll go ahead and give it to you all, because you're trying to go for leadership roles, and you're also in education, so I feel like it's a really good mix. If you can just tell them what you're running for, and then addressing the question, which is going to be, what are your thoughts on the lack of diversity in leadership roles and representation in education and other key decision-making organizations in Paducah?
All right, so I'll go first. So what are my thoughts with, let me turn my page here, on the lack of diversity in leadership roles and representation in education and other key decision-making organizations? First off, I'll focus on education because I am an educator. And what I do every day at Paducah-Tillman is empower students and families by removing those non-academic barriers. And for us to be in the top, maybe 3, I'm not sure if we moved up or down, diverse schools in the state. And if you were to come to our school and to see the percentage of minority teachers, so we have a math teacher, and it's a shame that I can actually say this, a math teacher who is an African American male. We have a band teacher who is an African American male. And then we have lots of education support professionals who serve at Paducah-Tillman High School, but we are not in the classroom. And what our teachers do, and is just, it's so important. We know support staff is important as well, but representation is everything. And I remember growing up seeing teachers that looked like me. Not that I couldn't trust the teachers that didn't look like me, but it was something about them being able to see through the lens in which I was being raised. And it takes building relationships and not just being there for the paycheck. And not by any means am I saying that is what the staff of Paducah-Tillman is doing, but I'm just saying from my personal experience and serving on several national boards when it comes to the education system, it's happening all across the country, but we're focusing on our local at the moment. So we have to do better. We have to be intentional. We can't say that we are sending staff to different expos to recruit and they just don't want to come because they don't have family ties. That's not enough. We are failing our students. And when you serve in a support role as I do, and 3, 4 other, and one is here, Miss Walton, she's probably like, don't say my name. But as education support professionals, we are the backbones. And most of those students, we're all that they have. And to know that when they're going from class period to class period, they have to get a tardy to come see one of us because we look like them and because that we understand them. That's not good enough. It's not good enough. So we must do better. And as far as the leadership in the city, I am being proactive, and I've been on the sidelines and been at the tables because I know that is where you can make a difference. You can only do so much on the sidelines and in your church or in your nonprofits or in your sorority or in your fraternity, but your voice needs to be at the table when those decisions are being made. And I'm going to be quiet because I'm not a preacher and I don't want to start preaching. But at the end of the day, we have to be more intentional, and we have to stop coming up with the excuses.
All right. So for me, and you did mention, represent whatever office we're running for. Is that correct? I'm going to turn it back up to you in case you wanted to introduce your office.
Google me. No, I'm just playing. Joking. And it's pronounced Lakeela. I know my mom was a teenage mom. It's okay. God is still good. Lakeela running for Paducah City Commissioner.
All right, and I am Corbin Snarden, and I'm running for District 3 State Representative of Kentucky. So now that that's out of the way, as far as leadership roles and what we represent and what's there, I'll say this first. You know, you can only grow something as much as you water it. So that investment in kids, that investment in there is key. Growing up, I am a transplant, but the community that I grew up, I'm from a very small county. I'm from Todd County, Kentucky, which is wedged somewhere in between Hopkinsville and Russellville. Like, nobody knows where it is. A few of you know. You probably recognize it because it's got the Jefferson Davis Monument there, the second tallest monument in the United States, freestanding, that is built to a Confederate leader, but that's neither here nor there. So you can imagine what kind of community that I grew up in. I did not have any teachers that looked like me. There was no black educators that looked like me. There was, I think, the entire time from when I went from elementary all the way up to high school, yes, some of our cafeteria ladies, our support professionals, our education support professionals, yes, they were African American, but few and far between. I didn't have a black teacher until I was in college. I didn't have a black male teacher until I was a sophomore in college. And if this tells you just how dire the need is, I've been in the city schools now. This is my 9th year, going on 10 in education. I have only known, at the school that I'm at currently, I have only known, outside of myself, one other black male to be hired in that time frame. 9 years is a long time, y'all. 9 years is a very long time. And I'm not the only one. Like, I know I'm not the only person going in education. So that leads me to say that if you want people in leadership, you need to grow people. You need to show them opportunities. So it's going to take some people that have to branch out and step out. And I think that Lakeela and I are doing that, definitely by running for office, and anybody that's doing any type of leadership role. When it comes to the city, or the county, whichever leadership role you want to be in, I truly believe in that you have not because you ask not. And when you ask amiss. And some people just keep missing because they're asking for the wrong things. So I think that, if we actively seek roles and we actively push for those things, we're going to be good. But even in with those leadership roles, we have to build our own. We have to encourage things. Do not understate or underplay whatever role or whatever position that you are in, whether that's good, bad, or ugly. Because if you are content with being at the bottom, if you're content at just this little level, this is my level of success, I don't want to go any higher, what do you think somebody that's looking up to you is going to do? Because somebody else is looking up at you. Though I don't tout it or anything like that, I really try to exercise a lot of humility. It does not leave me that there are students who are watching me, there are people who are watching me, there are kids that are in education now and have come back and said, hey, I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to go into education because you were in education, or you're really doing something major, like what made you want to do all this stuff? Oh, let me tell you, da-da-da-da-da. Those are those conversations that kids need, because you have to pour into them, because they're not going to see anything else if you don't show them. You're only going to grow as much as you water it. So I think we need to make sure that we're investing in those seeds that we have in the ground.
Thank you. And now we're going to open it up to the audience to be able to ask some questions to be answered by our panel. And I'm going to ask, you can come back up. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just raise your hand if you have a question, and if you have a specific panel member that you want to answer those questions, just let us know. And make sure that you're not talking until we actually get the mic to you. And so I'm going to also take a mic, and for our panelists, if you can maybe share one, because one person will be answering at a time, and then we'll go from there. So, and this will be about a 30-minute exercise. So anyone have any questions? And I'll go ahead.
My name is Ralph Pretty, and I'm with the Mayfield NAACP, and this is my group of members, and we are with the Redress Committee. My question is, I sit and I listen and I hear everything that y'all saying, but one thing we fail to realize is that sometimes when we're trying to reach our young people, we talk down to them, then we shut them, then they shut down on us. So we as human beings, we talk down to each other, then we shut down. We're in a small community, and we're trying to, how can we reach the young people? Paducah have a lot going on over here, a lot of education, a lot of people here. What can we do to reach the Mayfield Black community, the Fulton Black community, the Hickman Black? There are people that need to be educated, that need leadership. How can we reach out to them to help them also too?
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat and reiterate the question for everyone. And if we can keep it to questions so that we can give a chance for everyone to, so that we'll have those specific action items. So that question, if I can paraphrase it, would be, how do we reach other Black and brown communities that are in the West Kentucky area?
So my first thing is, I would say you want to hear from them. And I know you're like, well, if we have a forum, they're not going to show up. So somehow you have to find out what it is that they're interested in. And then as your local NAACP chapter, then that's when you go and start hosting those events. You may have one person, you may have two people, and gear it specifically towards the youth, and then maybe some for the older generation, and then mix it up. And then trust me, when they see that you care for real, and that you're authentic and you're not doing it just to say, oh, we're having something or we've had something, but you guys aren't showing up, food is good too. But you need to, A, hear from them, find out what they need, although you probably already know what they need as far as changing their mindsets and those essential life skills of time management and budgeting, but give them an opportunity to share. Your committee get together, host those small meetings, and once again, it's going to start out very intimate, so don't get discouraged, because if one person gets help, you're making a difference. And what we have to understand as leaders, sometimes you're the one to plant the seed. You're not going to see the tree or the flower going, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm wasting my time. You're not. It's not in vain. And you seem like a genuine person, so just make sure when you put forth your effort that you are authentic and that you're genuinely doing it for the right reasons to better your community. And then reach out to your McCracken County NAACP and do some joint efforts once you start locally, and that way you'll have a little skin in the game.
Just to piggyback real brief on it, what can you do to engage other communities, especially in the youth? I would definitely say, well, one, let's change the paradigm. Let's look at it differently. We got to stop looking at everything as this is Fulton, this is Mayfield, this is McCracken, this is XYZ, wherever. Last time I checked, I'm Black anywhere I go. So, we got to stop looking at it as this is a separate community, this is this whatever. If you're trying to engage young people of color, or just young people in general, I would hesitate not to just say, oh, well, we're going to meet over here at this place because this is this. Look, we're all coming together. We're all trying to get to the same place. We're all trying to succeed, and all the things that Lakila said, ditto to that. Like, I definitely think start there, but expand the thinking beyond, well, how do we reach this community, this community, this community? We all in the same community.
And I'm going to go ahead and go to someone next question so that we can get as many questions in as we can with the panels. Anybody else have a?
I don't think I need it. My name is Olivia Burr, and I'm a former social worker with the Paducah City Schools. And I started a family resource center, one of the first ones in Paducah, and I'm very concerned because as education reform came about, our focus was on parents and on kids who were receiving free and reduced lunch. And we focused a lot on getting parents involved. And parental involvement to me is the most important thing that we can do. So how can we really break down barriers, start really working together and collaborating instead of everybody trying to do everything on their own? And how can we do that and really get parents involved? I mean, there are ways to do it. I know we can do it, but we're going to have to start focusing on all parents, whether it be rich, poor, Black, white, Hispanic, whatever, because parental involvement. And the second part of that is teaching both parents and the kids social skills. And we stressed that in 1991. That was one of our focuses, and the educational system allowed it. We taught kids empathy, and we taught them how to problem solve. We taught them anger management, and therefore it started in kindergarten, and it started with parents coming. So we have to focus on both. So we got to figure out how to do it, because if we don't teach them, they're not going to be engaging properly, because they're going to be mad, angry, don't know how to problem solve. They're going to be can't use iMessages and all that. They're not going to understand that. So yeah, it has to be taught, and we can't take for granted that they should know it.
And okay, so your question would be
What can the panel suggest to our community as Black Americans? How can we involve all parents?
And y'all got to give a better answer to her, because I'll tell you that was a good answer, to be honest. Follow up, try to at least.
I'll try to. I think what we need to do is pretty much be transparent. When I say that, we have to give our own testimonials, because a lot of us in the room right here, when we looked upon, certain people look at us differently, because they don't know. The song says, you don't know my story, what I've been through, you don't feel my pain, what I've had to do to get here. So a lot of them don't know, and when you're talking to those that maybe feel that I can't communicate with you because you're in a different social, economical, financial, but once you gain someone's trust, you see that they open up. And they have a tendency, they want to interact with you. I can tell people my story. People may look at me and say, this, that's, but I'm like an onion. I wish sometimes I could be peeled. And I wish people could see my heart and see me. Don't look at me for where I am and nothing like that. I want people to look at me, because sometimes I have a tendency, people are reluctant to address me because they said we're not on the same level. I came from a four-room house, shared a bedroom with my sister in a bunk bed with the pot in our room, all right? And had to take it out every morning before I went to school and empty it in the outhouse, all right? But I tell people, and if I could tell people my story, they say, oh, I see how you struggled in high school. Now I'm willing to open up and interact with you, because now we have something in common. I started out, didn't do good in school, but something clicked, and I said, okay, Tony, I'm going to get beyond here, and I'm going to start doing that. Maybe I can talk to that parent and say, listen, let me tell you where I come from, what I went through. And at that point, they see a connection that I can help their kid. And I can tell them, if you want to expand and grow, don't give up. But and I always tell everybody this. When I look over my life and everything that I've done, it is minute. It's minute. The greatest thing that I have ever done in my life, I give it to you. June the 11th, 2013, February the 9th, 2018. That's the day my two kids accepted Christ. Amen. Right there. That is above and beyond. So when you look back in the day, the civil rights movements and everything, education and everything, they had a base and a foundation, and that was the Lord. Amen. It starts at home. Amen. But if we can get them on that right path, they'll see that they've been blessed. They have a gift. They have a talent. And they can use it, because it says that you can do all things. But you've got to interact with that parent and let them know that don't give up. Open up. Come to me. Ask me. And I can, if I don't have the answer, I'll lead you down the right path to someone who has.
Thank you. Does anyone else have another question?
Good evening, panel. Name's Arthur Boykin. I have a question. We talk about passing the baton. My question is this: how do we create or generate a platform in which you have someone to pass it to? Because I'm okay with that. But what I find, another elephant in the room is 25 to 55 being committed. I'd like to hand the baton to somebody, but I got to identify who's willing to accept it. And so how do we go about doing that? How do we create a forum where, these old senior guys, persons who are ready to retire, got someone that they can hand it to?
if I'm not mistaken, Libby, I'm one of your first. I worked with Libby way back then. We don't want to tell how old we are, but I was trying to help Libby do a mentoring, tutoring way back then. And when I first moved back here from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that's where I saw, and I came back with that desire to work in the community because I saw minorities there involved, judges, lawyers, all kinds of people, professionals. I used to go, I couldn't afford to go now, but I was going to see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar play basketball because I could afford a ticket back then, but I probably couldn't now. But, you know, I coached Little League Baseball, and Tillman's baseball coach now was one of my students, Tremaine Donalds. I had to pick Tremaine up for practice. His mother didn't come to the game. I had to take him back home from practice. And it's about 7 or 8 of those kids still here in town. So I find myself now not having as much time, not because time haven't changed, I haven't taken as much time. We can make a difference. We don't have as much time, we don't take the time to get involved as a community. And so we can make a difference. Ms. LeBou said just one at a time. If we just did one person at a time. My kids go to the county schools, but I spend most of my time in the city. I need to get back out there where I can be more supportive of them, my grandkids are going to the county. But I find myself working more in the city with JW, with me, you, Anton. We used to, Golden Corral used to be our hangout at least once a month. We would have lunch to brainstorm and just talk about different things. You know, we just need to take on that we want to make a difference. Now, I say I don't have much time, and I got one of my part-time employers here, and he's trying to take more of my time, but because I drive for Passport time, and it's not that I can't retire. I'm not working because I need to work. I'm working because I'm trying to stay young. I'm 73 and I'm trying to stay young, so I stay busy to stay young. But let's try to rally around this as a community. Let's take on, and I hear Tony talking about the frat groups. You know, we got, I'm not a college graduate, but we got the frat this, we got the alphas, the omegas, and all. If those groups could come together, forget about the Greek, whatever, but you know, you all could make a heck of a difference in that mentoring and tutoring. If you got past who you are, you know, that's the answer. All you educators, all you college graduates, if you all get past each other and work together, you all could make a difference. I mean, education wouldn't be no problem here in this town if you get out of your own way. We would not get out of our own way.
Thank you. Someone else wanted?
You know, I wanted to say something, but I think Brother Hamilton just dropped the mic. As the young kids do, they just drop the mic. Let me just elaborate really quick. I don't know, and bear with me real quick. I learned a lot in life lessons through athletics. And one of the things I learned about a great leader is his or her ability to get the best out of their staff. And so being at the Boys and Girls Club, I evaluated what we had in my first year, and understanding where we need to go, I realized that I need to surround my team with the best that they can be, including helping me out with areas I might be deficient in. And so with that, there was a pro football coach who retired and was a tremendous coach. But the minute he left, the organization fell straight on the ground. Like, it's almost like they started over. So how great was that coach? His inability to be able to put the people around him to be successful. He never molded the next person to come in. And so when you say, how can you pass the baton, it's all about what we do as individuals, as teaching someone and giving those people the opportunity. And one of the comments that I made earlier was that lack of trust. That lack of trust comes in because that person, he or her, and this is not pertaining to any one person, but that sometimes comes in when there's an inability to be able to teach and mold and get what you need to get out. And so, as an example, to go back to my staff, I have a unit director that we've already started conversations about, my expectations for that person and what does that person want out of their career. And so one of the things I told him, I'm like, regardless of whether you want to stay with the Oxford Cross Boys and Girls Club or not, if you choose to be in this profession, it's my responsibility to be able to put you in winning situations and give you the tools needed for you to be successful. Those are the same things, to be honest with you, that Mr. Cross taught me a long time ago. And I was ridiculed a long time ago about not willing to want to come back home, right? And one of the things that I realized in a conversation with the individual who meant well, I'm just like, I'm doing a lot right now in the community I'm in because Mr. Cross lives in me. And so I'm broadening my territory so that I can bring others closer to God. That's the Jabez prayer. And so now that I'm home, I'm really giving back to the community, and I'm seeing these young kids and even young staff members who are flocking to come in to say, hey, Mr. Clark, can I come work at the Boys and Girls Club? The first thing I ask them is, what's your why? Why you want to come here? And so now that we build on that, that gives us the opportunity for me to say, what are your strength finders? That's a book that I learned. So we can find out an individual's strengths. How do we have difficult conversations? I need to teach kids and my staff how to do that. And so those are the things that I think that when you talk about wanting to pass a baton, we have to put people in, and I don't know if it's the correct word for it, but subordinates, people who are under you, you got to put them in situations to give them opportunities to learn, to allow them to make mistakes. And then once those mistakes are made, those are opportunities for growth, not for punitive damages or whatnot. Like, we don't want to get them in trouble, right? And so those are just what I've learned in this leadership position, and also when I was in intercollegiate athletics, and I learned when people put me under their wing, they kind of threw me out there to the wolves a little bit, but allowed me to make mistakes and said, okay, it took me a long time to be an assistant and associate athletics director. That's not easy for a black man to get on that level in intercollegiate athletics. And one of the things that I realized even coming here was one of the knocks on me was, would he have the ability to raise money? Because a lot of times we don't have African Americans in positions of leadership where you can be have the opportunity to raise money, right? And so the only way that I could be able to do that is to have those opportunities, right? And if I do make a mistake, that's a mistake, but my heart is in the right place. I read last night, and I'll leave you with this, sorry. I don't know why I was up, but I was preparing for a meeting this morning, and I ran across a quote: do not fear what you know or when you know you're doing right. And I had to think about that. And that was something that came across Facebook. And I was like, why am I so nervous about this meeting that I got today? Well, the reality of it is I shouldn't have been worried about it at all. It's more or less self-doubt. It's about an experience that I had, but I knew that I was over-prepared for it. And we did a great job with that. But I don't think that I would have been prepared for it today if I didn't have the experience I had walking through the door. You have to be allowed to be able to make mistakes and learn from those. And so that's what I would say to answer the question is, we have to be able to find those who have similar whys, understanding what their goals are. And once they identify those, let's be mentors and tutors for them and allow them to grow in their profession, right? And give them the opportunity to do what they need to do now. It's like we said earlier, if we don't rise to the occasion, obviously that's not the one. But not everybody should not get an opportunity because they don't exhibit those type of behaviors. So,
thank you. We have room for about one or two more questions depending on our answers back. So we actually to the young lady. Shavine?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Gabrielle Copeland, and I'm a sophomore at Paducah Tillman. And the panel talked about how the youth should be more involved and how we need to be ready to have the baton passed to us. But my question is, how are we supposed to be ready when the youth's ideas, especially the black youth's ideas, are seen as childish or unimportant or way too far out to even be taken into consideration?
So my first response is, whatever room or table you were at and they were not valuing your opinion, I think you need to move on to the next thing. Because there are organizations that care, like the NAACP Youth Branch. We have organizations at Tillman, and I know you are a leader and you're asking for your colleagues in the social media world, but you guys can get involved in organizations at your school, and once again, the NAACP Youth Branch will be a good start, and not only would you get local opportunities, but national opportunities to travel throughout the country and network, and that's something that our black professionals, black community, African American, however you want to label it, we have a problem when it comes to networking, and that's a whole culture thing, and that's a whole nother forum. But we need to do a better job at networking and understanding that not everybody is out to get us. I know a lot of us have trust issues, but if you are going to advance in whatever you do, I don't care if that's your career, if you're a politician, you're going to have to build those connections with not only people that look like you, because everybody that look like you is not for you, I'm just saying, but people that don't look like you. So I would say, Gabby, even though I know that probably wasn't a personal experience, if they don't value your opinion, keep it moving, and don't let anyone ever make you feel like you're not good enough for whatever reason, being a woman or being brown skinned. I would say if they don't value, know your self-worth and keep it moving.
First off, that was a good question. Like you had some gasp, like. But no, seriously, there's this obsession that we have with trying to get a seat at the table. Well, first off, I have some questions about the seat at the table. So first off, how do I know that what's on the menu is something that I want? How do I know that you're going to treat me right if I get to the table? Is my portion going to be the same as your portion if I sit at the table? So that led me to think about, why do I need a seat at your table when I can have my own table? So if you have a good idea, if you have and you have the work ethic for it, and you have the drive and the strength behind it, one of the things that I would say is, if it's something that you're super, super passionate about, go for it. Some things you ask permission for, and then some things you ask forgiveness for. Like, you have to be able to make that mistake. If it's a drive on there, if you see a need that hasn't been filled, you have to fill it. If you see something that's there that is a fantastic and an awesome idea, that's almost every great idea in the world was started by somebody who was told no, who didn't have an outlet or a venue for it, and now you can see what's kind of going on with them. I think about one of the more prime examples of that is it's Black History Month. If we look at like the story of Madam C.J. Walker, she made all of her own hair care products and turned it into a multi-million-dollar industry. Y'all know how many times that woman was told no? Y'all know how many failures she went through? How many times she got told that this wasn't gonna work or that wasn't gonna work? And then all of a sudden they wasn't laughing when she had the bank. So, I say to you, like, if it's an idea and you feel like it's being discounted, if it's a really good idea that you're really passionate about, don't go against your parents. but go for it. Don't wait for somebody to give you permission to do something that you know is right.
We have time for one more question and one more answer from one of the panel members before we wrap up.
Good afternoon. My name is LaToya Burton. I'm just a concerned citizen. My question is, given the lack of representation from individuals in my age category or millennials, what suggestions does the panel have as far as marketing strategies to engage, to attract the individuals, as you would say, 18, 24, even younger? And my second question is, with this town hall meeting, what is the hope or the intention of the information that's coming out of it? How do you plan to take this information and actually affect change?
Great wrap up. Who wants that one?
Well,
make it count. Don't get that mic if you ain't gonna make it count now.
I guess the millennial will answer that one. So, I'm going to echo something that Lakila said earlier. When you're talking about marketing strategies or things to kind of push forward on there, know that your network increases your net worth. So who you network with and who you know is all key. So often I see in my age category and the generation that's coming up is that, they have fantastic ideas. They might have the best idea in the world, but they try to go it all solo. They try to do it all alone. And then the next thing we hear is, well, I didn't have any help. This didn't work out because I didn't have any help. Well, you didn't have any help because you got to make connections with people. There are so many good ideas that I've seen die because people didn't connect and network with the right people. You would be amazed at what you can get done by just being in the room sometimes. Just showing up at things like the chamber breakfast, city commission meetings, these board meetings, which are all public, by the way, like city board meetings, county commission meetings, they're all public. You would be amazed at who you meet, what you learn, and what you get just from there. So I would say that would be the key part, is that networking component is so important, because oftentimes when you're young, the biggest impediment isn't that you don't have, you have the energy, you have the ideas, you just don't have the help. So, you have to fix that problem by going to get help. And then the second part of your question was, I'm sorry, what do we hope to gain from this panel?
So yes, I agree. I know about the chamber breakfast. That's because of where I work. But how do we reach individuals such as myself is the question. And then my second part is, with this information, with this panel, how are we going to use this information to actually affect change? We've heard your input and thoughts, but what's the next step? Because often we have meetings, we sit at tables and we say, well, we should do this, we should do that. But then there's no follow-up function.
So to further expound on what you were saying about how do we engage, it's twofold. The network increases net worth, and connecting with people is key, and that also means the most seasoned generation reaching down. And I say the simplest way to communicate is, don't talk over somebody's head. Don't try to use $15 words. I mean, yes, we could all be lugubrious and all this, blah, blah, blah. We could all do that. But I think the easiest way to do it is to sit down and have real basic conversation and listening. I cannot stress that enough. And engaging people, sometimes that means that our generation, the younger generation, has to be willing to branch out and engage, like actually step out and be like, hi, my name is da 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 da. But that also means the seasoned generation going over and say, hey, I noticed you were over here. What do you do? What are your plans? What are your thoughts? So it's a twofold on that. But what I hope to see from this, it is no accident that, we have a couple of people running for office. It is no accident that these people are up here on this panel, and it's no accident that you guys are all here. So the best thing that I think that we can do is go back, tell somebody, hey, I went to this forum tonight and they were talking about this. You'd be surprised what comes out of conversation. Now, if we want to move from conversation to action, you got to have a plan in there. And you have to have, I like to think of things as, SMART goals, simple, measurable, attainable, reachable, all of that stuff. So you really have to get the people that are your supporters, sit down and say, this is the goal that we're going to have by this date. We're going to do, we're going to buy 30,000 Jolly Ranchers at Walmart by Friday at $2 a piece. Like that is a goal, and that's something that you can track. That's something that you can measure. That's something that you hold each other accountable to, because there's a component of accountability too. So I hope that, as we're talking about some of the issues and things that we have, that first off, you encourage people to get involved. You encourage people to go vote. You encourage people to go and put their faces in these places that we're not having representation. Encourage them to apply for that position. Even if they might say no, you applied. You have to you have to move from just saying it to doing it. So that's my suggestion.
And we'll have to actually wrap up. We start on time, we have to end on time, but I can imagine that the people that are on the panel will make themselves accessible a little bit after this, but also that whole thing about connections and networks. People should be trading numbers in this room. You can see that these are movers and shakers, so you would want to make sure that everyone connects in the room. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Dr. Reese. And thank you all. And thank you.
All right, let's give another round of applause to our panel. Shamara, thank you so much for doing that. I got to tell you, as I look at my wife Connie, 30 years ago, we sat and we had a real engaged town hall meeting. It was killing me sitting on the side. I wanted to say so many things. I want to be on a panel. That is all right. Let me offer, by way of closing, and certain to those watching in attendance, a couple of thoughts. Let's call this my synopsis of a 30-year reflection by way of, as I had the opportunity to come back to Paducah, second time around, without failing down to a person, and I do appreciate it, people would say basically two things. It is great to have you and your wife back in the community. I will go with, well, how are things going? Say, nothing has changed. Then they'll say to me, what are you going to do? I said, no. What are we going to do? There's a we on the end on that one, right? So the question is, what are we going to do, right? One. You had a great question, specific in terms of how do you reach the millennials, which you are part of that age group, I believe you said, or connected to that age group. Yes? Yeah, I'm assuming you're also on Facebook. So the direct answer is through your sphere of influence. What are we going to do? Through your sphere of influence, based on what you've heard here, talk to as many folk as you can, and in your own language and in your own networks, because we all have networks, is about ultimately getting folk engaged in the process. The saying goes that knowledge is power. I contend as the people we remain powerless because you got to understand how decisions are made. Said at the very beginning, 2 action steps that will make a difference is getting more people to sign up and getting involved, serving on these boards. Because if you've got a problem with your water, and I'm thinking if you're on the water board, you have an opinion. If you've got a problem with education, get on the school board, you can make an impact with education. Someone asked me recently, the chamber had the annual dinner. I think last year, Lakila was one of the winners, and that was great diversity representation. I don't think we didn't have as much as we had in previous years, but I shared with the individual. So, but understand how part of the process works. The first question, I'm on the chamber exec for transparency. First question is, are you a member of the chamber? If you aren't a member, that's going to be problem number 1, yes? So be a member so that you can qualify to be recognized, whether it be a business or an individual Citizens of the Year. That's how these processes work, right? So really, it is about learning by doing, learning by growing, and learning by making yourself available, taking this key step. Another 30-second piece that is very important and very powerful as well, too. 30 years ago, on that stage, the late Oscar Cross, the late W.C. Young. Notice my emphasis, the late, and what has happened is those individuals have transitioned, and the expertise, the knowledge that they had died with them. Not an aspersion, but it's just a reality. So the question really becomes now in our time, who are we intentionally finding, seeking, and making ourselves available to get them to step up, to be able to pick this thing up within the next millennium. That's upon all of us. My last piece is, this is kind of one of these kind of heady sort of things, but I was mentioning, and I hope he's watching, I think Bill Evans pulled a coup on me somewhere. Don't really know him that well, but particularly as a student in the media, when I think of the African-American reporters in this room, and I noticed it said plural. I believe we got 3, 4 at the same time. I thought it was in Atlanta one moment when I saw that. It shows it's possible and it's doable, but that's huge. That's huge, right? That's a coup. That's a great example, though, of somebody somehow, Harvard landed there, understood the importance and the significance of representation. And likewise, that's what we try to do here at the college. So we get a vacancy for boards, right? PJC, foundation. We want to diversify in the classrooms with faculty and staff through our diversity plan. That's what we do. See my colleague SG from Murray. This is the sort of stuff that we do, right? So ultimately, I want to say to all of you, individually and collectively, truly, we are in a new decade. It's more to me than a cliche. This is 2020. Paducah, I believe, is positioned with some uniqueness. The city is still in the 20s in terms of percentage of diversity. I believe the county is 11%. You look at it statewide, that's actually pretty good diversity. I attended the NAACP luncheon, as many of you did. Earlier in that day, I spoke over in Cairo. In those two locations, I was doing the math, there were just around 800 to 900 people. It's one of the largest, I believe, that we ever had here in Paducah, and added the numbers in Cairo. But what I was struck with was of those 900 people, 850 were not engaged in their communities. They showed up for the celebration. Amen. So the attendance is good, but the action is missing. Amen. All right? The action is missing. So my charge to all of us, individually and collectively, this is the time. It's been going on way too long. We got the capabilities, we got the people, we just got to up the ante in terms of our commitment to it. With that, again, thank you all individually and collectively, and again, it's also on Facebook, so this is an opportunity for those who were not able to be present here to also engage in the conversation, and we look forward to ongoing growth, next level things happening right here in Paducah, McCracken County. Thank you all so much. God bless you all. And again, thanks again to the panel. And we want to do a group photo with the panel as well, too. There's some giveaways. Absolutely. Thank you all so much. God bless you all. And again, thanks again to the panel. And we want to do a group photo with the panel as well, too. There's some giveaways.